Hello,
in the wide world of sports is going on.
It is Scotch.
What was that?
4 Dummies here.
That was an intro.
That was.
I love surprising you guys each week. You never know.
You guys don't realize that we don't get to see the intro either. Only Drew, the guy that made it, the maestro that made it. So this is kind of new, and we always sit here and watch it like it's a movie.
It's like, wow,
Well, even Tom
what is
says,
he doing?
I love his custom intro. I try to make it a little bit
they
more.
look good.
So if you're watching the replay, welcome to Scotch for Dummies. Tonight we're gonna get some interesting discussion going on. You're gonna kind of school us, and you are too a little bit. And I think Sean might make it. We'll see what happens.
I prepped a little bit, but not as much as this guy did. But first and foremost, gentlemen, happy Thursday! Hot diggity dog!
Happy Thursday,
and to all of you out there in virtual land. I will be honest. I did not. I started off with this Glenmo just to stay away from the Japanese because I want to come into this, live with everybody out there. But I'm interested to see where we go.
This is like the hot thing right now. Like it's the number one whiskey, right?
Well, So when you hear Japanese whiskey, what's your gut feel? What do you hear? What do you feel? What's your thought?
It's like the equivalent of Pappy right now, as far as you can't find it. It's so expensive. It's like the thing to do.
But there's a lot of crazy crap going on in the wide world of Japanese whiskey, right? That's what we're talking about.
There is. Absolutely there is. And that's the thing. Japanese whiskey is like a premium bourbon that you can't find. And you can only find the cheap bottles even the 12-year bottles are way expensive because it's supply and demand.
We have covered Japanese a little. We've tapped into we've done a brush over on it, right?
Yeah.
But it's about time that we dive into a little deeper on this discussion.
Yes.
I want to say hey to everybody who's out there. Let's just give a quick shout out. Who's here and who's not. Because we're appreciative of everybody. We saw a few of you on the pre-show for our patrons. Good to see you.
You didn't see Bob H.
I didn't see Bob H. in the pre-show. Bob H. I see Blocklinger and Brad Murphy. We did see him, the man down under. Paul M. I see D. How you doing, Dina?
Alejandro.
Alejandro, my man. Good to see you too.
Pierre.
We did see Pierre on the pre-show. Jim T, who is drinking batch 8 teapot dram. You're killing me.
That is fabulous.
I see Wesley, Zach, and
Bobby J's in.
Hey, Bobby J. Happy Thursday. Are you working, my friend?
I'm sure he is.
And I see Daniel H. So I don't know what you all out there know about Japanese whiskey. Some of you probably know more than we do, have more bottles. I don't have a single bottle on my bar.
No, I couldn't find one either.
I'll be honest with you. We have these 2 bottles on our bar because that's all I could find in our local area.
Yeah.
But interesting. We'll have a good conversation about what these are and, the price points. And I think he's got something spun up for us later.
I got a little blind tasting because I want to talk through this. I know very little, so I'm actually very interested as well. And I know enough to be dangerous. And we've got a pretty interesting agenda now. You want to kind of go through that at the high level?
Yeah, so first what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the history of Japanese whiskey. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about kind of where it started, where it's going, what the booms and bust times, those kind of things. And then we want to get into kind of what has been the development of the whiskey in the last 10 years up until, false Japanese whiskeys on the market and things like that. And then talk about, kind of the guidepost that was put in by the Japanese Whiskey Association on the official rules to be called a Japanese whiskey.
And that was kind of recently,
right? That was in, they actually went effective in April of 2021.
Okay.
The Labeling Act?
What's
it called? I'm pretty sure it's something like it. Yeah,
I call them the Japanese whiskey rules.
Which is right. It's a stake in the ground. They finally drew a line in the sand because they need to get their arms around of things spinning out.
Japanese whiskeys had spun up so much that there were lots of companies from outside of Japan putting whiskey in a bottle, making it look like it's a Japanese whiskey, and selling it at a Japanese whiskey price.
And you're going to get into some details on that later. We got a chart and a couple of things to show you, so that's going to be interesting.
And then we'll go through kind of what we think the future of it is, and and then with the tasting. I can't wait to do.
I'm looking forward to tasting too because I have had a few glasses in my time of Japanese whiskey. I don't remember too much about them, but I do know that from the ones I had were very subtle and unique, nothing crazy as far as maturation. So I'm interested to see what you're going to take us down the road. And I did prep a little quick demo of blind for you guys to kind of talk through it. So we'll talk about obviously our love for Scotch and whatnot, but I'm interested to see you know, because a lot of this stuff is single malt too, right? So it's going to be
Now
interesting
what
to
we
see.
have,
It
but
depends.
What we have,
Yeah.
but we're interested to see how these things compare. And I matched this up, I think, pretty well.
Okay.
Right. So
Cool.
just the precursor, the blind isn't between these two bottles.
No.
No,
I was gonna say,
'cause that's going to be pretty
I was going
obvious.
to say, if we can't tell the difference between a grain and I
Yeah,
would.
so the two bottles we have up here, the Nika Coffee Grain and the Centauri Whiskey Toki.
Right.
And so those are two samples. They're both blended and blended whiskeys, but it's
Yeah, and one's
combination.
obviously all grain, but
Yeah.
it's their representation of a much bigger
Yeah.
market, right? So I don't know where to start. This is you're the maestro here.
Well, let's
You're-
start on
you're
let's bring
you're
up
mic man.
the slide projector. So I did, PowerPoint little thing to kind of help us all out here. So let's talk through kind of where it really began. They were making whiskeys and rice whiskeys and things in Japan as long as people have been drinking alcohol. So
Time out. I'm gonna stop you along the way. Is the rice spirits, is that considered a whiskey?
it is a whiskey because
Okay,
it is a
good,
grain. It is a
good.
grain.
Yep.
Just grain distillate.
You're
Trying-
talking
But
sake.
but it doesn't
Right.
it doesn't probably meet the official rules going forward. But it is
Okay.
it's always been
so when you
considered
get a
Yeah,
sake,
rice
you're,
whiskey.
you're drinking whiskey.
You're
So,
technically
sake's a
drinking a whiskey.
wine, though, I think, right? Is
I thought it was more of a
it's
wine too.
sochu is the
Yes.
the rice whiskey.
There you
Okay.
go. You're right. So
So,
and that's why I asked the question. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
play devil's advocate for everybody at home.
Got it.
So really, the start of the official whiskey as Scotch lovers and bourbon lovers and things have considered it with single malt grains and things really began in the 1920s. There's two people that are the fathers of Japanese whiskey. Shinjiro Tori was a pharmaceutical wholesaler, and he said, "I want to start making whiskey. I want to start making good whiskey." So then he hired a gentleman named Masataka Takatsuru.
Yeah.
Disclaimer: we will be
I
butchering names.
tried that several times to try and get it right, but
Just so you know.
in front of the camera, it goes bad. So Mr. Takatsuru was he had studied in Scotland for years on the way of making Scotch whiskey, and so when Tori hired him, he styled their whiskey after Scotch. So that was the intentional design.
I should everyone.
And the interesting thing about that is it even went to the point where their first distillery and dunnage houses and everything were positioned within Japan to mimic the environment of
So
Scotland.
they're trying to mirror.
Absolutely.
They're trying to make Scotch whiskey in Japan.
Right.
That was their goal.
To the best of their ability.
Yeah. Now, admittedly, the whiskey they were making is a very small percentage of the whiskey that was being made at the time, because they had all the rice whiskeys and other things.
Right,
that they were
right,
doing
And
as well, 'cause
talk to
they-
me about environment. Then is the environment similar? I mean, it's got to be.
certain parts of it. So you get in the mountains and you go north and you do get cooler and
So I did look into that a lot, and
Okay.
interestingly enough, the first thing I did, I looked up there's the distilleries that Andrew's already spoken to a little bit, and I was like, all right, where are they located on the latitude line compared to Scotch distilleries? I want to know.
Oh yeah, right.
And interestingly enough, it's not quite that simple, because the most of the distilleries over there, let's say they're like 48. Most northern one is 48 latitude, and I'm like, all right, what's that comparable to? And I'm like, oh, it's comparable to Paris. And I'm like, why is Paris not getting nearly as much snow as they're showing in Japan? Well, now you got to start taking in the warm waters from the Atlantic Ocean
yeah.
coming across, and Japan doesn't have those warm waters. They just have the climate coming right off of Europe, right off of Mongolia and Siberia.
In Siberia,
Yeah, and so they get, it's really technically way more colder at that latitude on that part of the planet than it is in Paris. So it's not quite as easy as I thought it was going to be. You have to look at other environmental, issues, if you will, or variables.
Yeah.
But back to your point, they were trying to mimic the Scottish environment as best they could with their island.
because that was the style. That was what he was trying to do.
That
And
makes
so,
sense.
yeah,
if it works,
exactly.
Like
Now,
recreate the wheel.
think about it though. What was Scotch like in the 1920s? So it was a very different than what.
Oh,
we
that's a good
consider
point
now.
too. Yeah.
But it was that style. And then, so they worked together for about 15 years. And then Takatsuro went out on his own and he formed what eventually became Nika. So Mr. Tori put together essentially what became Suntory, and
his
Takatsuro
protege
became Nika. And those are the two
big
big houses.
Those
Those are the two big houses of Japanese whiskey.
That's right.
And so that's where it kind of began. And from that time, it was after that, essentially, it was a domestic product. You didn't export it. You didn't export it like Scotch you did. Japanese whiskey was drunk in Japan, maybe China, maybe Singapore, but generally Japan. It was a very small domestic market. And then, and so the interesting thing was that just trickled on along through World War II. Suntory Nikka made whiskey for the Japanese soldiers in World War II for them to have on the lines and things like that. So just like any other industry, it supported the war project and everything like that. Now, if you look though, what was happening in the late 80s in the U.S.?
We were going blend. We were a blend market.
We were also going away from whiskey.
It was
more
white,
rum and
white spirits.
Gins
it was Zima. It was
all
that kind of stuff. It was vodkas and gins and things like that.
That was kind of when a lot of cotton balls or mothballs happened, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Same thing happened in Japan.
Cotton balls.
So between 85 and 2000, the same thing happened in Japan. Lots of distilleries closed.
Really?
So Nikka and Suntory both opened distilleries. There were other companies that had opened at the time. They went through the same issue, just like Scotland did. Brown liquor was out.
That's very interesting.
Everything happened. It
was a worldwide type scenario.
It was.
That's kind of interesting. Okay.
And even though we were less connected then, it was still the 80s, so you were still more connected on TV and radio and things. So that trend happened
Supply
globally.
demand.
Yep.
So then 2000, so at the start of 2000, there was a Nikka 10-year-old whiskey that won Whiskey Magazine's Best of the Best award.
So that puts them right smack dab on the map again.
Right here, here's the new checkbox right here.
Yes, and so that put Japanese whiskey as something that may be worth looking at. It had never won any award before.
Okay.
They hadn't been, quite honestly, they hadn't been submitting as much at that point because it was primarily domestic. So once 2000 hit and it won an award, and then Suntory won some awards in 2004. And then they started winning they pretty much dominated after 2007. So they were making whiskeys that were that good. Keep in mind, 85 to 2000, they weren't selling much. So they had a lot of storage. They had a lot of 18-year-old whiskey.
That's right.
Exactly. They had their aged whiskey that was good, and they were bottling it well, and the refinement of the whiskey was really tasty. And
very similar story to our last week's episode with Glendronach. I mean, kind of the same idea in a sense as far as storage.
Sure, without the official mothballing, cotton balling.
Correct.
I love it. Okay, so there's obviously that going on, and what I want to know though is during those 85 to 2000 years, there's not much being sold. There are distilleries that are being mothballed. There's still whiskey being laid down. It's not being sold.
Not much. Yeah, they.
So it come 2001, Nikka gets this award. Do you happen to know how many distilleries are in Japan? Whiskey distilleries are in Japan at the time?
At the time? Oh, probably half a dozen. There weren't that many.
And I asked that because I don't even know, I don't know the answer to that question in today's day, right?
I have some information on that coming up in a future information. Yeah.
I mean, just trying to prep for the show and get myself acclimated to Japanese whiskeys a little bit more to be able to ask intelligent questions here. I'll be honest, really, it's Nikka and Suntory, man. Suntory owns 3 distilleries. It's those 3 distilleries and Nikka, which owns 2 distilleries, or they own 2 brands. That's it. That's all I could find.
Well, so there's Mars, that's also a big brand, less in the U.S., but domestically, and you can buy Mars in the U.S. That's one of their brands. And there's Cheetah, and there's a couple others that we'll get to. And so you can get probably 10 or 12 different distilleries of Japanese whiskey in the U.S.
Okay.
A quick pause, guys, and say thanks to Tom R. He's expanding your experience to world whiskey.
We're trying, Tom.
Rum next. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for super chat. Appreciate that.
Thanks, brother.
All right.
So what do you got next?
Okay, so we're at 2001.
Yeah.
That's where we stopped off.
And that the news from there on is pretty much
churn and burn.
Well, the U.S. market blows apart. Now, I think I have a slide coming up, but I don't know if we want to get to that before we want to do the tasting. So with the information going on the history, we'll get to the 2001 where they put the official whiskey rules in. But let's go to let's show that next slide because I do want to show that. This was my introduction to to Japanese whiskey. So if you look on the very front of this picture, you can see a rail line that goes right across the front of the picture on the bottom.
Yeah.
That is actually a train, personal train that you can
Commuter.
between Osaka and Kyoto, I think. And that little kind of light gray yellow box right just below there is the train station.
Oh, okay.
So you can stop, get out of that train station, walk to the right a little bit along the road, go up that road, and go right into the distillery. And that was my first Japanese distillery tour.
Oh, so you did this.
I did exactly that. I visited this Yamazaki Distillery, and that's pretty cool. It's a beautiful distillery. It is an industrial plant. I mean, if you go back behind the buildings, and you've got the powerhouse and everything.
What about, so what I see right here, obviously distillery, is there dunnage here too, or are they storing?
There's some. So up in the hills and those little peak houses and down to lower
here, right?
There and down to the lower right or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's like
storage areas. Yeah.
Okay.
So what do you think of this? No, you've been in a few different distilleries.
You've been in a few bourbon distilleries.
What do you think? Is it basically they're all basically the same?
It is very similar. I mean, you get similar kind of the still design, the powerhouse, the dunnage house, the tasting room. One thing about them, they've got a tasting room that is amazing in that they've got whiskeys from all over the world that they can use for comparison tasting.
Well, that's kind of cool.
It is. It's really neat. But it seems small relative to like the American commercial distillers. It is, but that was one of the very first ones built at Suntory Distillery. So, or the Yamazaki Distillery.
Sunday evenings trying to pick out stuff in that picture too.
Yeah, you can tell those super geeks when they start analyzing.
I love them.
So that was neat. I mean, and I didn't take that picture. That picture was on the Suntory website. And
Right.
Wow!
Yeah.
I walked down that path. I walked up that road and right into the distillery.
That's kind of personal. That's cool.
It is cool.
Good for you.
So that was my experience, and I'm trying to think when that was. So I knew you guys, but we weren't doing Scotch.
No, we
yet.
were, but I think it was very, very beginning.
Yeah, so
I
it
think
has been
6 to 7 years ago.
Yeah, probably 2005, 15 maybe.
15, 14,
yeah, that sounds about right. So that
because you brought back the Scotch Blue.
Yeah. No, that was from Korea.
Oh,
he brought me back a bottle of Johnny Double Black.
Oh, that was right
buy.
before we started doing this. Then. Okay.
Yeah. So that was that era.
Yeah.
So it was neat. And I enjoyed the whiskey. It was really that was some of my first kind of just raw whiskey tasting, but it was very refined and sweet and not bitter, not smoky, none of that. It was just a nice whiskey.
You actually brought some Japanese whiskey back, and there were smaller bottles, but they were higher end.
Well,
they were
not
18.
at the time. So this was in 2000. Early 2010.
We didn't know we were drinking though.
I had a bottle. I think I had a full bottle of Yamazaki 12, and then a couple small bottles of 18.
Yes.
What if you would have kept that Yamazaki 12
Oh my
open?
gosh! Yeah, well, the Yamazaki 18 is $1,000 a bottle now.
Yeah,
for a full bottle,
and it was delicious.
It was insane, and I could have got a lot more. I just didn't know at the time, and it wasn't a big deal at the time.
Right.
So
who knew?
Yeah.
That's another statement for later. So let's pause for a second and let's talk about, since we're talking about distilleries and how they make their stuff here. Why don't you get into it? What's going on with what we have in front of us here? I know this, Mark. You've got a blend here, right? As far as this one, and this is
Suntory Toki is a blend of their Suntory's 3 distilleries, which are
Yamazaki, Hikushu, and Cheetah.
Yeah.
Cheetah.
And so they're all under the same ownership of Suntory. So it's almost like Diageo, who owns a bunch of distilleries. Hey, why don't you take some whiskey?
It's kind of like Diageo's making Monkey Shoulder, in a sense?
Sort of. They own 3 distilleries,
Well, it's
and
like
they're
Johnny Walker
taking
Blue or black. Yeah.
And they're taking whiskey from those 3 distilleries and putting it in
single
this.
malt.
That's what this is.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a couple single malts and a grain in here.
Right. Okay.
It's Cheetah's a grain.
Yeah.
So this is a non-age statement blended Scotch.
Blended.
Japanese.
And then the
So,
ingredients are
Not
coming
Scotch,
from
blended Japanese whiskey.
They're getting their own sourcing of their own ingredients.
Yeah. So that's yes. This is considered a Japanese whiskey. So that means it is saccharified or fermented, distilled, bottled, aged, water. Everything comes from Japan. No, I don't know about the grains. I don't know if the grains that come from Japan.
I didn't see if the
water-
grains have
water
to come
source
from
does.
Japan either or not.
Okay.
And it has to have some malted grain in it to be a Japanese whiskey.
Oh, it does.
Yes, and I didn't see a percentage or an amount.
There is no
but
minimum.
It has to have malted.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why
Now, what do we
Sochi
have
doesn't
here?
count.
I've seen this in grocery stores.
So that's a coffee grain. So that is a great all grain made in a coffee still to demonstrate the power of the coffee still. But this is not a Japanese whiskey. It does not list the Japanese whiskey on the bottle. Wait. No, on the site, on their website, I did verify it. On the website, it does say that because it is all Japanese components.
But there's no malt. Well,
There's
is there any
malted grain? There must be some malted grain.
There's
in there.
right. There's other malted grain, not malted barley. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but the difference is this is all grain.
Yes.
And it's made in a coffee still. So these two are going to be drastically different, obviously.
Okay.
But they're also the two main houses representing
They are
here,
the
right?
main
So we do
houses,
have the Nika and Suntory, which
Yep.
Well, let's start with this one first, and let's just go through these. And
Okay.
you guys have no idea what's in what, right? As far as
oh wow,
glasses.
hang on, I'm going to clear the palate here. So
I know what they are.
So wait a
which
minute.
glass is which? Okay. Yeah,
We don't know.
so
He's
I'm
not
not
telling
going to
us.
tell you.
So blind here,
But I tell you what. It's one is
no, don't
this,
count anything.
and
Yeah.
one is a Scotch.
Okay.
okay. So we're blind tasting this against a
And what is
Scotch.
this? For our
This is
listeners?
Suntory Whiskey Toki. This is the blended, non-aged blended Japanese whiskey.
Right.
So
And that's
there's
going against a blank Scotch that I put in here that I thought would be comparable. I have no idea. I'm gambling on what I think flavor profile. So I'm curious if you guys can grab them right out of the gate.
Interesting. So we're gonna call
Make
these,
sure you keep the coins with the glass.
Yeah. So this is first fill and second fill.
Right.
Boy, this is really soft. Light.
Yeah. So you're talking the second fill glass. Yeah, it's light, like cotton, linen,
We'll say the blue chip
Ooh.
and
blue
the
chip.
black chip.
This is a little bit richer, a little bit deeper. Yeah, this has got a little bit more going on in it. I think the one that's actually just a hair darker, would you say? On
Yeah.
the right. So
So the black
one-
is hair dark.
yeah, the black coin is a hair darker on color, and it comes through in the nose.
So the blue
They're
chip.
similar, aren't they?
Yeah, the blue chip is light and clean cotton. I can taste the grain in it.
Yep, I can smell the grain in it.
It is sweet. It's light. It's fruit a little
I
bit
don't
of
know.
light fruits, but I'm
This second one is making my mouth water. The first one, I'm like, okay, there's whiskey in there.
So you tasted the blue chip first. Now you just tasted the black chip, and you just tasted what? The blue. Okay, I'm gonna go in the blue.
the black chip has a lot more barrel influence, a lot more wood influence into it.
Okay.
Much more flavorful.
Wow.
Maybe some grain in it, but it's not.
Yeah, I haven't tasted the second one. This first one is very
Man.
clean on the palate.
Yeah.
Very, very clean, light,
Right.
cotton,
Wee bit of sweetness there on the finish.
honey.
Yeah,
light
that's
honey.
a sweet honey though. But I mean, that's really.
It's actually very, very sippable.
Very
It's
easy to drink.
Very
It would
easy to
it would be
drink.
great in like
What's the ABV? It's got to be low, like 40 something.
43.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't see.
Oh, okay. So tasting that one has now
Yeah,
brought
43.
a lot of the like bourbon mature characteristics out on this one to me.
Yeah, I would agree. Definitely much more oak influence on this. The blue chip. Yeah, it's yeah, it is. It's like chew on linen, cotton, or like a.
They're both very light on the
Clean sheet.
nose. Both smell grainy to me.
That second one's got, to me, there's just a lot more meat on it.
Mhm.
There's more chewable. You
Yep.
want it. It really just clings to the tongue a little bit. It's definitely not nearly as clean as a palate as this one, but
Yeah, this. So the
this one lasts a lot longer too.
It has like a, it's not, but almost like a bourbon type taste to it for some reason for me. I'm not sure why, but it's not, obviously.
I think the blue chip I think would be great in a blended like whiskey and tonic or some ginger ale or something, and it's because it's really
Oh,
light.
really?
It's
So-
really light and it has a little punch to it, but it's really designed to be an accent to something else. It's not would not call that.
It's like a foundation, a light.
I would not call that a
foundation.
sipping.
It's interesting.
They're
Before I go
both
back
like
to this,
that, to be honest.
I had this
It's
one.
more wood.
This is the last one I had, and the really, really, really late palate. I'm talking like a minute later, finish here, if you will. I get a cereal note.
Yeah. Got like a little Cheerio note almost.
Yeah, and way at the
yeah.
back, it's there.
Oats.
Yeah.
This is definitely has. They're very similar with the honey cotton palate, but this one it's richer, deeper, more wood influence, and it does have a lot more finish than that does.
I think it's all about the wood influence
Yeah.
on the second one.
So, do you guys want to take which one's a Scotch? Which one is the Japanese whiskey?
Well, I gotta tell you, it's making it difficult because I looked. I shouldn't have looked at this bottle because I had my mind made up. But now I looked at this and I'm like, damn, that one looks like that one.
So
You're right.
okay. Before you make your call, actually, talk to me about like. Obviously, you guys are Scotch lovers.
Right.
Imagine this is your first Japanese whiskey, and to our viewers that have never had one before, and this is pretty much a readily available bottle right now,
This
right?
is okay. So this is
If you- I
anywhere.
guess you
Let's
should
just say
readily, but-
$35.
The Tokyo is $35.
Yeah.
So I would probably not buy another bottle of the blue chip one because it's too light and kind of.
Okay.
I don't buy whiskey to blend as much. I don't think it would make a good old fashioned. I think it would be washed up by an
Not
old
rich
fashioned.
enough for you.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not rich enough for me. I think this other one, if the second one, the black chip, is the Centauri, I think it's definitely good for blending at $35 price. It's got enough flavor that it would punch through an old fashioned or something, and I think
So-
that would be tasty enough.
While we're talking some more, guys, I would love to see your comments because I know you're playing along with us right now. If you want, start putting your comments in. What Scotch you think I would have married up to this one? I'm curious to see what you think.
Right,
So,
because I'm kind of in agreement with you here. I actually am gravitating towards this one more than this one.
I do like that.
I like this. This one's it's just got more to it. There's more body to it.
Mhm.
I'm
A
not
little
saying
bit
I
richer.
disagree with. I like this one, but it just doesn't satisfy my palate at all. It's so clean and there's just not much there to it. This one is the one I really like. Now,
All right, so
unfortunately, looking at these, I have a feeling that this is.
so what's your call? Which
well,
one?
so
Which one is
what's the
Scotch?
other bottle?
I'll tell you afterwards. Tell me which one's the
Which one
Scotch.
is
Which one is?
Scotch?
Which one?
So here's where I'm going to eat the crow and go out on camera. I was going to say this one was the Scotch until I
I
saw the
don't think it is.
camera right there.
I don't think it is because
I don't either
it's
because
got-
it's so close to the camera. It's the color.
No, because one rule about Japanese whiskey is it's got to be aged in wood. That's the only rule. So Scotch has reused casks and those kind of things. So I tend to think this one is from a more spent cask. If it was aged in cask, so
It's so the challenge here. This is what I want to get at you guys.
which is the Scotch.
Yeah,
I think
I know, but
I think
more
that one is
so.
more likely Scotch.
More so that you are debating tells you something about the quality of
Right.
what they're producing.
I think
It's a
I'm
very
being
relatable-
hoodwinked.
Yeah, I think it's kind of unfair because
I think I'm being hoodwinked in the fact this is delicate. And as far as this one, you got to spend time with this. You've got to just really get in there, give it some time and attention, and be patient with it. Oh, we haven't heard Andrew drop a coin.
It's
in
been a
quite some
while
time.
since he's dropped a coin. So we got some people commenting. I like what you're saying, guys, so far. Interesting.
that tastes like a that.
And don't
tastes like
look
a
at it.
bourbon. Yeah.
This
Well,
is good.
everyone,
It's-
if we would have had options, yes, we would have. This is
And-
all we could find.
And I enjoy this. It's good, but
I like
it is-
starting out with that. That'd be a nice starter too.
I could see myself pouring that one and spending a lot of time because I think the slower you drink it, the more you appreciate it. This one is just more upfront. Come and get me. Here's something to chew on. Go get you.
I like the guesses, Whiskey Crusaders. That's a good guess too. Yep. All right. So have you guys decided which one's which?
That's the Scotch.
So you're saying the blue is
Blue
the
is the
Scotch.
Scotch.
Okay.
Wow, that really got soft.
That
really got
it's a
soft.
complete
So,
guess. All right, so
all
let's
right,
go.
listen, and not that I'm cheating here, but I can tell. Like I'm looking at colors. I know ABV of one of the
It's also
two.
thicker.
I've got to say that's the Japanese, and this is the Scotch. Just
Wait,
because
So you're agreeing with Andrew.
The blue is the Scotch.
out of what I'm determining because of what I see and know from what I'm gathering, not just from my palate. I actually enjoy them both. I'm very impressed with this one, knowing that it's the Japanese, but that's the Japanese.
So good guesses, guys. I've seen a couple people nail the brand, not the bottle so far. Glenmorangie GX is more malted, so
Look at that girl.
yeah.
I see Scotch on
She's
the
got a cool
bayou.
video. The smelling
do
kit.
it yourself. Yeah.
So
All
I'm
right,
gonna
girls.
pull out. I'm gonna pull out the bottle I poured, and you guys are gonna be like, "Oh,
Can we then compare it?
you
It's
can
not
compare
White
it,
Walker,
yes.
is it?
What did I do with it?
That's right.
Oh, no,
It's on the shelves behind you. You put it back there somewhere when you made me go over there.
I did. Where did I put it? Oh, it's right here in front of me.
Hedonism.
Hedonism.
So wait, what's?
So you basically.
So this is all grain.
That's all grain.
It's all grain.
Well, why didn't you let us chase this one against this one?
No, because I figured this. I figured what you're getting into. This is going to be a very good, and obviously it is because I'm going to put the bottles next to the right one. You ready?
Oh.
Yes, you guys picked Japanese whiskey as a Scotch.
The Scotch style.
That's very interesting. I was shocked when you guys were doing that because it does have very. You even said at the beginning of our call they wanted to mirror Scotch
Yeah.
production,
that was the
and that's
design.
a good thing.
Yeah.
Now we're not drinking like
Ooh,
all
this
their
smells like
stuff,
vanilla now.
but it's a pretty cool thing.
Because that's weird. Because I was never really a big fan of the hedonism.
I never was either.
But compared to this one, I think the Toki is really light. And
It's
really
more
clean.
delicate than this
Yeah,
is,
for
and I
sure.
always thought hedonism
This
was
is
decent.
really clean on the palate. It
There's a lot
really
of
is
grain in
clean.
there, I think.
Now, it makes me feel better that I pulled out that oat note on this grain whiskey, right? Oh, good save.
All right,
But
yeah.
hot damn.
Interesting.
Wow.
Excellent.
Very fun.
Yeah. So it just goes to show you that, we're still dummies, number one.
Yeah.
And number two, we're having fun. And then number three, it's Japanese whiskey is pretty good.
And this is their cheap bottle.
And that's
So-
a cheap bottle. I would love to get some more. I mean, this makes me want to explore if you can find them.
That's the problem.
Which is probably what you're probably going to start talking about next.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd buy that.
I'd buy that. And I would drink that as a basic.
Interestingly
There's too
enough.
much grain in it.
So time out. Let's go back.
That
Let's
grain finish is not good.
hit the video and rewind. Go back. You had made a comment that you thought that this would be interesting in a soda or
Yeah.
on the rocks and stuff, right? Go to their website. Spend 2 minutes. Scroll down. That's how they want you to drink it. I'm serious. I was
Well, that
on
makes
there for
sense.
45 minutes earlier. I mean, I was
Okay.
like,
That makes sense then.
so the fact that now that I know what
Yeah.
it is, and you're saying
The
that,
grain,
it's not-
the grain is too strong for that to be a sipping whiskey. That's my
yeah,
concern.
we have no idea,
It's got to be 3 years. I know that.
right?
That's it.
But there's malted. There's malted.
There's some
whiskey,
malted,
right?
yeah.
This one's pure grain.
But this is a lot older.
We have no idea. There's no
It is
age
not
on that.
age, but it is understood to be.
Well, and the fact
Yeah.
that John put rich on the label, I mean,
Yeah.
no, it is much more richer. It really is.
Yep.
There's a lot more meat on that in that bottle. But
So talk
that
to me
was cool.
about supply and demand and what's going on with this.
Yeah. So if I'm making a 10-year-old whiskey, how far ahead do I need to plan?
more than 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
So
At least
so
13.
let's look at the Japanese whiskey volumes. This is whiskey to the U.S. So this is only the U.S. market. Is not the entire Japanese whiskey market. So in 2010, the U.S. imports were $1 million.
So
Not much.
12 years ago, $1 million.
Yeah.
That's
These
it.
numbers are very interesting.
In 2020, it was $67 million.
Holy shit.
That's a lot, dude. That is a massive.
God, don't you wish you would have bought a bunch of Japanese whiskey in
Now,
2010?
so admittedly, the U.S. market in 2010 was very small in the entire Japanese body of whiskey. So, they were definitely at that time they were exporting to China and to Singapore and to other Pacific Rim countries for sure. And it wasn't big in the U.S. yet. And over the last 10 years, it's really blown up into the U.S. market as well, or the demand has gone up. So that is the key with us trying to find in the U.S. They don't have the distribution yet to the U.S. for the amount of whiskey that the U.S. market wants. So that is why it's hard to find. That's why it's really expensive.
Right. But if you back up to that slide, were they laying down casks to support that 2020 number.
No.
No way they were.
No, because
No one can predict that.
their first award was in 2001.
Dude, that's like buying Tesla, 20 years
No,
ago.
no. The one thing you will notice if you go, and there is and we'll get to this website in a little bit. There's a website that shows the entire volume of Japanese whiskey market, and in 2008, the volume of Japanese whiskey sold really started to surge. So they were selling a lot more whiskey, and quite honestly, between 2000 and 2010, you've maybe increased the volume of whiskey by 50%, give or take. So yes, it's still a huge
Facebook.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
So there's still a huge volume increase, but it's a global volume increase. The U.S. market is the extreme, but overall they've had to double their capacity in 10 years, and so it takes a while. There's a big lag for that to occur.
I mean, and if you think about that, Scotland is having the same problem. It's just a lot more distilleries there and they're trying to catch up too. No one can predict the amount that we are all consuming,
and especially when it takes if you're aging in Scotch style environments, it takes 10 to 12 years to really get decent whiskey.
At least.
Right. The 3-year minimum is just
that's just
rule.
a capital flow. I mean, you're just trying to get some kind of income.
Yeah, that's why this is probably 90% grain.
Exactly. It's a quick way to get a quick hitter and make some money. And
understandable.
It's a good product so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's let's compare it to what it is. It's a $35 product, right? I paid $39 at the liquor store, and then I went to Meyer and saw it for $33. Whatever, I lost it. But I mean, that's the price point.
And everyone is exactly saying the same thing. When I talked to Centauri folks years ago, that they taught the age state in whiskeys is to keep up with demand. Exactly. And you have to. Everyone's done it. That's what happened. I mean, when we first started doing this 6 plus years ago, right? We didn't have NAS was a new term for us.
Yeah.
And we didn't get the NAS until 2 years in, really. Started kind of.
Yeah. Look at your 12-year-old prices going up.
No, they're insane.
They're going up, and the Scotch industry created this problem, right? They're the ones because in the 80s it was all NASs, and it is what it is. And now they're struggling because the demand or the supply is finally starting to run out, and it's tough. I mean, look at Johnny Walker. They flipped their gold and their platinum, their 18-year blend, 4 times in the past 6 years.
And why?
Well, because
they had to. They had no choice.
Right.
The guy walks into the warehouse and goes, boys, we got a problem.
and so similar.
Call it platinum.
Call the platinum up. He's next up.
Tom had a question about how much are they using pot stills and how much are using coffee stills.
Good stuff.
It's a fair blend. So a lot of the grains are going through the coffee stills. That's your high volume. They have pot stills. A lot of the new distilleries, and when we get to the next slide, there's a lot of new distilleries, and they all have their own pot stills.
Nika it did a run of coffee malt.
Yes,
but from what I hear, it's pretty damn hard to get a hold of.
Oh, yeah.
And that makes sense because that's unique. I do know that the difference between the Yamazaki and the Cheetah distilleries is literally the stills. The Yamazaki has downward line arms and just straight necks, whereas the Cheetah has the onion bowl with upward line. I mean,
then it's not a grain distillery.
No, not Cheetah. It's the other one. It's the. I'm thinking Nika and the two distilleries at Nika.
Oh, the Yochi
and them. I can't pronounce it, man. Makiyaki. I don't know.
We got it coming up.
It's crazy, but they have pictures on their website to show you the differences of their stills, and we've covered it so many times in the Scotch market. You're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I understand why they have different spirits coming out of this because they're two different styles.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, let's go. Let's go to the next slide. This is we're getting into the distillery. So, this was a bit of a. This screen didn't come out very well. So really pull up your screen or save do a screenshot and blow it up. So if you go to in Wikipedia, you go and they say as of 2020 there were 9 active distilleries. You go to whiskey.com, they have 17 listed. You go to the maps of Japanese distillery map on Communication, and they have dozens. So and if you look at the bottom of this slide here, there are several that one opened in 2018, one opened in 2016, one opened in, so right when that boom is hitting, distilleries started showing up.
Why wouldn't they?
And then you got
the boom.
but then you got at least 3 years before you can actually sell it. So there are distilleries opening all the time right now.
Well, wait a minute. In 2018, the boom is going. Distilleries are open all the time. There's no whiskey rules in place. Those distilleries can pull whiskey from around the world.
I see what you're doing there.
I need to make some money, man. I gotta keep the lights on, dude.
Yeah.
Yep, that is true. So if you want probably the best resource that I could find on the internet about Japanese whiskey is nomunication.jp. There's a link on the bottom here, or just nomunication.jp. That guy has spent years in Japan understanding the distillery market, and he's really got a lot of information, and it's so up to date. I mean, his last distillery map was updated in May of last year.
And why don't we have him on the site?
That's a great idea. That would be fun to talk about this Japanese. We probably should have planned ahead and done that, because he's very expert on what he's doing. So go to that website, because the next slide is what
I love David Leach.
It's your
Good for you, David.
So this is where we need to go back to the thing, because we can talk about the rules first.
Okay.
Oh, this is
all right.
This is kind of the meat and potatoes of the show, right? All right. This is where it gets interesting with these rules.
So if I had a jacket, I'd put it on. But so Japanese rules as of April 1st, 2021.
New stuff. So prior to April 1st, 2021, what was happening? Why did these rules have to come in place? Let's not go through these yet.
A million people were making Japanese whiskey and selling it under the Japanese whiskey name.
How? How were they doing that?
Because they were buying whiskey from wherever they could find it, and they were putting a Japanese label on it and selling it as Japanese whiskey.
So prior to April 1st, 2021, I could go over to Japan. Maybe I don't even have to go over there. I can buy some whiskey. I can buy a couple casks from wherever, and I can put it in a bottle. And I'm gonna call this some Japanese whiskey. Why? Because I watched Karate Kid last night. That's why. And that was legal. You could get away with that.
Yeah, it's funny. You actually got it in.
I did.
I can't believe we talked about this. He still found a way to put it in there, like a movie.
Told not to, but I had to, guys.
Bravo.
So we did a Japanese Scotch comparison, and there were some comments that there were some companies in Singapore that were buying cheap Scotch, putting in a label with a Japanese-looking name. It wasn't really a Japanese name, but they were Japanese-looking, putting some kanji characters on it and putting it on the shelf.
Japanese whiskey.
And selling that stuff.
And sell it for triple the price.
Right. But that's the extreme. But there were companies inside of Japan, distilleries inside of Japan.
Absolutely.
That were pushing that.
And actually,
limit.
if you look at the Nika, has a Nika from the barrel, and that is a combination of couple their distillates and Scotch.
And like Ben Nevis or something, they were getting distillate from Scotland.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I heard about that.
Suntory was doing it as well. There was a Suntory AO that is it has some Scotch in it as well. So now, admittedly, the big houses, Suntory and Nika, they never labeled those as Japanese whiskey, but it was whiskey with Suntory on it.
Right.
So who's going to argue that?
Nika from the barrel. It's a single barrel. No, it's not.
99% of people
not at
are
all.
not going to know that.
It was in a barrel at one point, but it's not even Japanese.
That's right.
Japanese
That's right.
It was in multiple barrels.
So the beauty is the big houses, if you look at their bottle, they're not going to say Japanese whiskey unless they meet the criteria. They've been using this labeling scheme for a while because they were the ones that pushed the industry to do this.
I was just going to say, they're the ones that pretty much underwrote these rules.
Yes, absolutely.
So is there something we can tell our folks that when they look for Japanese whiskey, what's something they need to look for?
Here's the rules.
Yeah, so well let's go through the rules first, and then we'll talk through that. So, so the rules that came into effect. All Japanese whiskey, anything called Japanese whiskey, must contain some malted grain, but other grains are allowed. Now, the traditional Japanese rice whiskey called shochu is not, because there's the saccharification, where they convert the starch to the sugar, is done with a mold, so it's not malted,
That's
and
wild.
so it's not. It doesn't meet this requirement, which is really weird because the traditional Japanese whiskey, the
Is
rice
not-
whiskey, is no longer Japanese whiskey.
I feel
Right.
like we have to do this. This is not right.
Well, I should probably have left, but
So
okay.
you did it
I'll-
with the,
I'll
they don't
put-
even know.
I'll put Dr. Scotch's label on, or his coat on, so I can go from here.
I mean, you sound like Dr.
Yeah.
Scotch, so you're doing a good
He's
job.
getting all geeky
So-
on us.
The next rule is saccharification, that conversion of starch to sugar, from fermentation to bottling must all be performed in Japan, including the water source. You can't pull water from elsewhere.
Okay.
It's all got to be there.
Got it.
It's got to spend 3 years in a wooden barrel, no greater than
What
700
sounds like
liters.
Scotch to me?
No, but
But it just
It-
says wooden barrel.
Wooden barrels.
That's pretty
very
that's
clear on that.
true.
It is wooden. It could be
It could be-
oak. It could be
That's
pine.
right.
It could be
Cypress. Who
peach
cares?
wood.
I-
It could be anything.
Cypress.
Pine.
Yeah.
Bamboo.
Whatever you want. It's got to be bottled at no less than 40% ABV. Caramel coloring may be used, so that's okay. So now the key is if you don't meet these rules, you cannot use any kanji characters on your label. You cannot use the Japanese flag or other names or images that evoke Japan.
Okay.
What does that mean? Wait,
So-
I read that too. Explain that to me. What's your interpretation?
So
They
the way
evoke
that-
Japan.
So what that's very specifically because they were saying master blender with a Japanese name
Okay.
because that implies that it's Japanese whiskey.
Right.
So, I mean, it was very clear because
Okay,
there were
okay.
several companies that were doing that and putting a picture of Mount Fuji on it or doing stuff like that, the things, or putting the cherry blossoms on it, to do things that make it look Japanese,
Don't do it.
but it's not.
He's
So
certain.
that's why they had that extra image, because that was the big issue. Most of them weren't calling it Japanese whiskey, but they were having imagery on their label that made it look like a Japanese whiskey. So that was the Yes,
So
sir.
you meet these new criteria, and now I walk into a liquor store and I see Japanese whiskeys, or what I perceive to be
Yep.
Japanese whiskeys on the shelf. How do I know they're Japanese whiskeys? What am I looking for?
well.
I don't
See
know what I'm doing here.
part of the problem is this next line here. Any existing brands have 3 years to comply.
Whoa.
So there are brands that are on the edge or actually in conflict of rule. These are a couple of them: Sansei, Fujisan, Fuyu, Isawa. They are brands that are probably not. They don't meet the criteria, but
But they got 3 more years to
They're
sell
an
their shit.
established brand.
Yeah.
They got 3 years.
Get
so
it
it's-
out.
So this is why.
That's a lot of
Yeah,
headache.
this is why
No.
you need to have this link to the infographic on your
So this
Number in your
graphic is
bar, your
kind of
bookmark bar.
cray-cray.
you need a yeah. So again, communication.jp.
All right, let me stop and share that real quick.
Let's go to this
So
graphic.
what's
is
this
weird,
graphic
guys.
going to do?
This
for us?
graphic will describe if you see a brand of whiskey, whether it's a real Japanese whiskey, whether it's a fake Japanese whiskey, whether it's a world whiskey, and it'll tell you if you see that
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
whiskey on the shelf, whether you can call it Japanese whiskey.
Okay.
And so we're locked up here.
We
I
are
don't even
locked
know
up.
we're live.
Hopefully we're still live. But
What
keep
if I
talking.
find a bottle with tentacles on it? Is that nation whiskey?
The browser is locking up on us, so hopefully we're still live. Hey, somebody text me if you got my number if we're still live because it just locked. So anyway, so
Thanks,
this browser,
Denmark.
or this chart,
Yes.
is pretty. I looked at it earlier. It's like massive.
Yeah. So it is. This gentleman did a lot of work on this website.
Thanks,
And,
Tom.
Across on the left-hand column, you'll have all the distilleries. So there's lots of distillery brands, and then under each distillery you have the brand. So one thing about Japanese whiskey is it's fairly linear with their distillery and brand. In the Scotch world, there tends to be more sharing of whiskey. That this distillery will provide whiskey for this brand and this brand and this brand.
Sure.
And it'll all come back together.
I honestly think it gets me more confusing in like the
All right.
bourbon world.
All right, guys, we're gonna give us 2 seconds. We're gonna come right back. Hopefully.
What?
And now we're back.
Now we're back.
Wowzer.
So,
Enough time for me to take a drink.
Yeah, I need to drink.
There we go. Okay. So
All
the
right.
browser crashed on us. We had to restart it. Yes. Sorry about that. So we're not going to be able to show the. Hopefully we're good to go. Can't show the browser the graphic now. But
Can
we
we
talked
get to
through
the?
Tom wants the intro next.
All
All
right.
right.
So
I'll try to get it back when you keep talking.
So the graphic goes through and will list all of your distilleries, all of your brands, and then whether they're Japanese whiskey, fake Japanese whiskey, or like what we call a world whiskey. And it's okay for a world whiskey to use, because if you're calling it world whiskey, that means that there's really no definition of where it came from. So let's see if we can share this.
Part of me says, I don't know if the graphic is quite as important from a consumer standpoint, because in my mind, do I ever walk into the liquor store and I'm like,
Maybe again because of this.
I gotta have, don't do that.
Yeah, we'll see.
I gotta have this
It worked before, didn't it?
Japanese whiskey.
Okay, that's
it's
not
good
okay.
for understanding, but at the end of the
So
day,
put up the
whiskey's
website
whiskey is a
or
good
link-
whiskey
send
is
the
a
link to
bad
the-
whiskey.
Yep.
I do like the fact that the Japanese whiskey industry has put down rules.
Yeah.
I that's a good thing. That is going to help them, make sure they have quality as opposed to just quantity, which is what you ended up seeing. But I don't know if I would ever go to the graphic to say, wow, is this really a Japanese whiskey? Maybe right now, because we're in that 3-year grace period. I guess we're going to call it a grace period. But at the end of the day, part of me, just my take, I'm going to walk into a store. Let's say there are 50 Japanese whiskeys on the shelf. I'm looking for Suntory and Nikka, because I know those two. If those two houses are putting out Japanese whiskey, they're
You're not gonna
steering
find
the
any,
industry.
but yeah.
Well, that's not necessarily true.
So that's why I asked the
They
question.
are also putting out world whiskeys, and they're putting out other things.
Those sons of bitches.
Because, but the thing is, you can look at the bottle and tell. So the thing about Nikka and Suntory is their labels are current to the standards in the U.S. So if they are making something that has Scotch in it, it will say world whiskey or it'll say whiskey. It will not say Japanese whiskey on it. If it says Japanese whiskey and you're collecting these major brands, it will be a Japanese whiskey.
Right.
So that is where you do have
good.
So that's okay that Nikka and Suntory are both doing it. They're both pulling distillate from other countries to keep up with demand. But they are appropriately labeling it to align with the new rules.
My point is, look, Daniel H. He's like, I don't care that Nikka from the barrel won't actually be Japanese whiskey. I'm cool with that because it was good. That's
true, and that's our
good.
whole point of this. Blended whiskeys and non-aged statement whiskey. If they're good whiskeys, they're still good whiskeys,
right?
And keep drinking them because you like them. That's fine. And what you don't want is misrepresentation on the bottle.
Right, to get you to buy something, to spend some money.
Nikka from the barrel is not a Japanese whiskey. That's fine. If it tastes good and you like it, keep drinking it.
Right.
It's honestly labeled as well. So
okay, good point.
So I didn't want to share the graphic again because I'm not sure if the graphic size is what screwed up the browser. So I sent a link in the chat. I'll do it one more time right now. But basically, this graphic is pretty interesting because it gets to the point where you guys will have to explain it to me because it basically shows and Mark, you were kind of trying to help me too, but it's pretty involved.
Yeah. So on the left are the distilleries. So Hanyu, Kawasaki, Miyagiko Distillery, those go into like Nikka coffee malt. Nikka coffee malt, if you follow the arrow down, will go into that as a Japanese whiskey. Because that is all done in Japan. Now,
so this is a way to find out.
So
for
wait
sure
a minute.
if
So Nikka Coffee Malt has Miyagi Distillery, and yes,
coffee grain. Those both follow down. If you follow the
that makes
sense. Japanese whiskey.
Okay,
now go down to the bottom of the graph. If you go down to the bottom of the graphic, is where you get the non.
Whoa, yeah. So what do we got going on here, dude?
So Chichibu Distillery. Some of those are Japanese. Some of those are blended into the world whiskey category. And then if you go to the very bottom of the graphic, you have let's say the Mars Sinshu Distillery. Some of those are the Kisuyama and the Lucky Cat. Those will drop down if you follow down into fake Japanese whiskeys.
Look
and there's a bunch. See all those brands in the center there, the Kensai, the Monsho, those are fake Japanese whiskeys.
So these are things that this is a graph, but he's turned into an app. That's what he needs to do. But these are all those things where if you're actually on a hunt for Japanese whiskey, you need to know what you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. So this center column, if essentially if the box is white, it's Japanese. If it's blue, it's a world whiskey, and if it's black, it's fake.
I got to be honest though. I mean, I would poll the folks that are watching. How many of you have seen some of these fake brands? Shit. I mean,
well, keep in mind,
well,
the largest market for Japanese whiskey is in Japan, and China, and Singapore. It's not in the U.S.
Right.
So that's the beauty. This gentleman who put this website up, he lives in Japan. He has lived there since 2008, I think. Yeah. So he's very experienced. He's been all over. He's been in lots of bars.
Yeah. A lot of that stuff we're never going to see.
Right.
In the States.
Well, so Daniel H. talks about fake Japanese whiskeys doesn't sound fair. They're world whiskeys. That may be true, but they're calling themselves Japanese.
But they're
whiskeys.
labeling themselves,
and they're representing themselves as Japanese whiskey. They're not representing themselves as world whiskeys.
About it. They are world whiskeys. You're right, but they're representing themselves as Japanese whiskeys.
Yeah. So I guess the true brand is they are not true Japanese. They don't meet the criteria for Japanese whiskeys. Are they fake? Depends on the labeling and things, whether they call themselves Japanese or not. That's a fair.
It's kind of a confusing thing where we're at. Well, I mean, it really does get jumbled up, especially for the next 3 years, right? 2 years. We're in 2022. Hot damn! Happy New Year,
it's been a year, yeah.
So for the next 2 years, things are still going to be gray a little bit. If you're confused or you want to know more, you can use the graphic to look at that link. But at the end of the day, there are some quality whiskeys coming out.
Oh, those Yamazaki 12s and 18s are. They're fantastic whiskeys. They're single malt whiskeys, as good as you can get, if you can get.
You know, one thing we didn't even touch, and we've got like 2 minutes here, but we didn't even touch about the difference between oaks. You know, we got American oak. Everybody knows American oak because American oak is kind of the standard, and bourbon, right? You know, and they're used across Scotland uses a shit ton of bourbon. What about, we've got Spanish oak. It's a nice spicy quality to our Scotch. What about Japanese oak?
The Japanese oak,
completely different.
It is. You got lots of sandalwood. It is a whole other show. And that was interesting because the Japanese whiskey criteria only say wood. I mean, it can be anything.
That just blows my mind.
That's a really open.
But when you get to the Yamazaki 12 and 18s, those are oftentimes in Japanese oak.
And they don't care about what was in that wood before at all.
It doesn't have to be new. It doesn't have to be old.
I'm trying to think of the Scottish rules, right? The Scottish rules definitely say so. They're like, whoa, you can't just put, that. What was in this barrel first?
It's got to be an oak. It's got to be in an oak barrel. I think it has to be aged in an oak barrel.
That's it. So so there's rules. They're a little bit looser, but they're definitely doing what they need to do to try to get a handle on their industry and protect it.
Yeah, so it can be Japanese oak. It can be reused bourbon barrels. It can be reused, sherry barrels, whatever they want.
Well,
there's no doubt about it. I mean, the title says enough of it. Japanese whiskey is definitely. I mean, if people talk about it, it's like the number one whiskey right now. It's the number one hot whiskey.
See, that's the weird thing is, on one of the graphics I had, so it was $67 million in the U.S. 2020. Scotch in that year was $800 million.
Right. But most of that's blends exported.
Well, no, that was to the U.S. market.
Really?
Yeah, that was $800 million to the U.S.
Still,
market.
probably half of that was blends into the U.S.
And in 2020, that was down 30% from 2019.
So the story I'm hearing is Americans drink a lot of whiskey.
Well, yeah. So,
but we're also starting to drink more white liquor. Yeah. I mean, because it was down.
Yeah. Well, or from the tariffs. We don't know.
Yeah,
so in 2019, tariffs. You can estimate the Japanese whiskeys were in the $60 to $62 million, whereas it was over $1 billion in Scotch in the US. So it's number one in trendiness and hot demand. It is not number one in volume by any means. And when you include all of the other, U.S. whiskeys,
I would argue that's a good thing for them because I don't know if they can meet the volume.
Oh, they can't. They can't.
So that's okay.
I mean, there's only between 20 say distilleries in Japan right now.
Right.
There's 133 or 137 in Scotland right now.
Yeah.
So
and rising,
but so same in Japan.
So one thing before, this is a complete topic switch. I want to wrap up Japan. I think we really did kind of beat it down pretty good. I'm interested in getting more than just the 2 that we have.
I'm very interested.
I'm going to keep an eye out and maybe go online and see if I can't procure a few more. Maybe we get the guy that put that website together.
That would be
sounds
awesome.
to me like this guy is the Japanese guy.
Yeah, we'll get him on.
But I do want to point out that Tuesday is January 25th.
Oh,
If you haven't put it on your calendar, you don't know what I'm talking about.
Day.
It's Burns Day, Burns Night. I hope you are at least going to find a few minutes to pour a glass and listen to his famous
The haggis.
The haggis. But I just wanted to point it out. Since it's a Tuesday and not a Thursday, might be difficult. We'll probably talk about it again on next Thursday. But
maybe we can get Sean to make
who
some
knows? You might just see ad hoc live. I mean, come on, it's Burns Night. You gotta have a scotch.
You have to have a scotch and
And if we're gonna pour one, why not just throw the camera in front of it and say hi to all of you? So anyway,
Andrew, thanks for doing this topic.
killer topic.
Great
Love
job.
Awesome.
I love
the fact that
I mean,
we're
Dr. Scott,
totally
or whatever you are.
Yeah, Dr. Scotch.
yeah, that guy.
Says Dr. Scotch on the coat.
Hope you guys liked the show tonight. We had a great time. I'm like you. I'm actually very interested in trying more of.
I've got to
Japanese
find a
whiskey.
Yamazaki 12 again.
It's worth
worth
experimenting
looking
with.
for,
Guy.
so.
There's good whiskey there. Don't discount it.
We've got a big year planned for everybody. We're getting back into Scotch reviews. We're going to do a bunch of other things going on. So keep up with the channel and stay tuned. Make sure you hit the like notification. We'll see you guys next time.
Hey,
Later.
cheers. Sláinte.
3, 2, 1.